Hey, you're back with the Get Out of Debt Guy podcast. I'm Steve Rode, and with me is Damon Day. Damon, say hello.
Hello.
We're going to talk about Zelle's hidden risks and how insufficient consumer protections leave you vulnerable to scams and frauds. Now, imagine transferring your hard-earned money in seconds only to discover it's vanished into thin air. That's the nightmare that thousands of Zelle users face with little hope of getting their money back. As digital payments skyrocket, so do the dangers lurking behind their convenience. Damon, you've used one of these, or at least more than one of these online payment transfer things through your bank, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean everybody uses these now. It's normal, you know. I remember a couple of years ago where people was like, "What? What's this Zeal? Zelly?" But now it's normal, and I actually prefer Venmo over Zelle. For some reason, Venmo just seems so much more user friendly.
Yeah.
The only time I ever really do Zelle payments is my son and daughter's batting coach. He loves Zelle, so he uses Zelle. So I always have to go and figure out which bank is linked to Zelle because it has to be linked to a specific bank. And then if you want the money from a different account, you have to switch it. It's a pain in the butt, but I have to keep it around because I pay him with Zelle. But other than that, I usually would use Venmo.
Zelle it's owned by a number of banks. It's the parent company of Zelle is Early Warning Services, and it's a conglomeration or a consortium of JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, PNC Bank, US Bank, and Truist. So that they all have an interest in this product and pushing it. And that doesn't mean that it's best for you. I think what's really fascinating about these payment platforms is that there are different ones. For example, in peer-to-peer payment platforms, can you think of any others besides Zelle and Venmo, offhand?
No.
I put you on the spot. Okay, well, there's some others like PayPal,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Google
Duh.
Pay, and Apple Pay. So,
So hold on. You asked me if I could think of any others. Two of them are on my phone and I use them all the time.
yeah.
And I'm like, no, you know what though? Apple Pay and PayPal, at least in my mind, have
Yeah.
become so mainstream now. I don't even think about them in terms of like Zelle and Venmo anymore. It's just like normal, but you're right. It's still the same kind of a deal.
Yeah. Now, here's what's really interesting and why I think everyone needs to take an interest in whatever product that they're using. I'm like you. I'm not a giant fan of Zelle, although my bank, wants to push it on me all the time.
Because it's in your best interest.
Yeah, it's like debit cards. People don't realize that the reason debit cards are pushed is because the banks make a premium on the transactions, not because it's smart. But anyway, I digress. So out of those platforms, Venmo, oh, there's another one, Cash App.
Oh, yeah.
Cash
I've heard of
App
that.
is Square. So out of Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, Google Pay, and Apple Pay, not all consumer protections are the same. For example, if you want to get the best consumer protection out of any of those peer-to-peer payment networks, you should only use PayPal. It has the most comprehensive fraud protection, and especially if you're doing commercial transactions like you're paying a business. Now, the peer-to-peer platforms that have moderate to okay protections are Venmo, Google Pay, and Apple Pay. So they will provide you with protections for unauthorized transactions, but it's limited if you've been scammed. Now, the least protection is from Cash App, which is that Square platform, and Zelle, which provides minimal protection for consumers. So they just came out with an extended review about the problems that consumers are facing with Zelle. And did you get a chance to look through that? Do you have any observations about what the report said?
Well, I mean, it was talking about, the number of one thing I did notice is that, and in my mind, it kind of, started to overlap with these gig apps that we talk about on the Penny Stupid podcast. But it was talking about how the, reimbursements for fraud back in 2019 were significantly higher
Yeah.
than they are now. And what I'm talking about is if you feel like you're scammed or you got scammed and you complain and you somehow are able to get your money back, right? Well, back in 2019, it was, they were saying 62% reimbursements, where now they're saying it's down to 38%.
Yeah. Or even
And one of
lower
the
with Zelle.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was thinking about was, you think about the life cycle of these things. Like, so when these things were brand new and they were trying to break into consumer psyche, like, hey, use us, use us,
Yeah.
use us.
Yeah.
They have this vested interest in trying to portray this is safe, this is secure, you're going to get your money back, don't worry, that kind of a thing. But as they became more and more popular and people were it kind of ingrained, on people's phones, and people were going to be using them and they were used to it and it was normal, now they're starting to get more stingy with what they'll reimburse, because it's not going to affect them negatively as much. Zelle itself, right?
Right.
Because if they started out where they first starting to break in to, consumers' psyche or whatever, convincing you to do it, and if the news was all negative, oh, if you get ripped off, you never get your money back, it would have never got a foothold and taken off. So it's kind of funny how you look back and see how these things progress for less and less consumer protections as they feel like they don't need to take care of you anymore. It's like a lot like these gig apps that we talk about, Uber and Lyft and things like that, where the driver pay goes significantly lower over time. After they have plenty of drivers, they don't need you anymore, and they'll just stop taking care of you for the most part because they don't need you.
Well, it's like PayPal, they have the most protection because as a company, they want to protect their customers. Now, I can't tell you that, Zelle's intention is to screw over customers, but when you look at the reimbursement rates, they're horrible. 15 to 20% of all scam disputes are reimbursed. The rest of them are not. And here's why. Again, this is why it's so important to pay attention to what rules, nobody's going to do it, but what rules regulate the financial instrument that you're using. Because Zelle payments and these peer-to-peer payments are not covered by the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. It only primarily covers unauthorized transactions. And Zelle transactions, they say, are typically categorized as authorized because the user themselves initiates the transfer. So,
yeah, and they have a big warning on there. It's like, are you sure this is the person you want to send the money to? Because you can't get it back.
Right. So if you're the consumer and you transfer money using Zelle or Cash App or one of these other lesser platforms, and you find out that you've been scammed, I'm doing air quotes there, then, the chances of you getting your money back is like, 1 out of 10.
So what I'd be curious about is, you can compare that to credit cards, obviously, but I would like to compare that to just a normal checking account, right?
Yeah.
You use your debit card or whatever, because that happens all the time. People, if you get scammed and you're the one that initiated it and you got tricked, there's this whole argument is like, was it the bank's fault that you got tricked and you gave this guy $10,000?
Right.
And you fell for this scam, and now you call your bank and you're trying to get the money back, and they don't get the money back for you.
Yep.
Is that the bank's fault and the bank's responsibility?
Well, that is
It's not like that scammer hacked into the banking system and stole your money.
That's a great point. You can put a stop payment on a check if you do it immediately. But Zelle and similar peer-to-peer payments offer minimal protection because oftentimes these transactions are instant and authorized by the user, just like we talked about. And there's usually no mechanism for reversing transactions or disputing them once they've been instantly completed.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of a credit card. Federal law limits consumer liability to $50. And because you've got that bank in between, it's not an instant transfer. You do have a mechanism of disputing it or blocking that charge. With Zelle or any of the peer-to-peer networks, unless they're going to stand behind you, the minute you hit send, boop, you're screwed. I always worry about if I have to, I have some contractors only will take Venmo. I always worry, am I paying the right dude?
Yeah.
Because the minute I hit send, I got nothing.
Well, if you pay the wrong dude, Steve, I'm sure you just have to send a message to the wrong dude that you paid and said, oh, I made a mistake. that $200 was meant for my other guy.
Yeah.
Can you please send it back?
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure they'll just immediately reverse it, right?
I can tell you right now the message I'm going to get back. Who dis?
What you talking about, Willie?
Yeah.
Well, I would be curious to know, because I know there are a little bit more protections, but like the same thing if you use a debit card.
Yeah.
And you pay somebody and then you realize, because if it's a typical scam,
Yeah.
air quotes, so not that you actually sent to the wrong person, you're not going to realize it right away. I mean, it's
Right.
going to take some days. Wait a minute. He was supposed to send me more money back than I sent him. And it's been 3 weeks and now I can't get a hold of him. Maybe I got taken here. And then you contact your bank and a lot of times, oh, well, did you send the money? Yeah, I sent the money.
If you contact your bank with a debit card, if you contact your bank within 2 days, it's typically limited to a total loss of $50. However, debit cards are different than credit cards when it comes to protections. And if you drag your feet, you can be liable for $500 or more if you delay reporting. So they're not all created equal. The one that offers the most protection is a credit card. I've said this for years. Credit cards and debit cards are covered by 2 different federal regulations, 2 entirely different instruments. And it's ironic that people say, I've had people say to me, maybe you have too, Damon, I have to use a debit card so I don't run up debt. Like, dude, use a credit card, pay it off every week or, twice a month or whatever. If you have the money to spend on the credit card, pay the card.
Well, one of the things that we use, and I love it, is the American Express. I used to have the Platinum card, but I had them switch it over to the Gold card because the Platinum was more for traveling perks and all that stuff. And I don't really ever do any of that. So I got more benefit out of the Gold. And the Gold was only $250 a year rather than $500, I think the Platinum was at the time.
Yeah.
But that card, it's like I'm doing air quotes, a no limit card. There's a secret limit, but it's a no limit, card. And you have to pay it off every month.
Right.
Right. So we use that card almost, it's like a separate checking account, essentially. We don't pay any interest on it at all because we pay it off every month. It's required to be paid off. I mean, there's certain things with that card now that if you're in trouble in a pinch, you can, maybe put a couple $1,000s to carry over, but not much. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you got $10,000 on the card, you might be able to get away with just paying off $8,000 and leaving the 2. But for the most part, you just pay it off every month. Right.
Yep.
There's no interest. You pay the $250 a year, you get all the, 1%, cash back, all that stuff on everything. And we put all of our expenses on that Amex card. Yeah. And we just kind of treat that like a checking account. It's not charging us any interest at all. And then we have all those protections. And what I get back with the 1% is I always do the Home Depot gift cards.
Yeah.
Because we shop at Home Depot all the time. And that's the best reimbursement rate when you start looking at the Starbucks cards and all the other stuff. So we usually get a few $100s in Home Depot gift cards, every quarter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like a free shopping spree at Home Depot. And there's no downside to the card other than it costs $250 a year, but I get probably $1,000 to $1,200 a year in Home Depot gift cards.
Right. So, exactly.
And the only thing I'm doing is I'm using that card to buy all of the things now there's some things that don't take a credit card, obviously, but anything else that takes a credit card, we just use the American Express card. And then I pay it. I just treat it like it's a debit card, essentially, but it has all those protections in place. And American Express is great about that stuff. I can just go online, dispute, okay, done, money's back in your account.
Right.
We'll investigate it. And they always just leave the money in my account. I've never had American Express come back and be like, nah.
Scammer's not going to respond.
Yeah. So I don't even carry a debit card in my wallet.
No, me either.
I don't even carry one. I haven't carried a debit card for years, and I never use one ever.
No. Well, here's another example. I do the same thing. I have one primary credit card that I use just for business stuff. And I looked this morning. It's an airline card. I have 226,000 points that I've got on that card. And we're booking it to take some friends on a trip with us. And they're getting free airfare. We're doing free hotel using the points. And or paying down part of the trip.
Dave,
Yeah.
I thought we were tight, bro. Why is this the first I'm hearing of this free trip?
Well, it was supposed to be a surprise.
Oh, cool. I love you, man.
I love you too. Well, getting back to Zelle, the reason these peer-to-peer things took off was...
Wait, no, finish how great this story is and this free trip for your other friend.
Oh, yeah, well...
Do tell.
I use points just like you do. I mean, I pay my card off every month. I pay 0% interest on all the transactions I make, and I get all the benefit. And plus, I get access to the airline lounge. So there's no downside for me, and I'm getting all the benefit of it. And if, hey, everyone wants to go and use their debit cards and get nothing for it and, believe all the BS about the personal finance thing about it. You can only use a debit card. You should never use a credit card.
That was the point about...
Is,
go ahead. Your advice?
My advice is you do you, boo. But but it doesn't make any sense.
Well, that was kind of my point about the American Express card, because the knock, the Dave Ramsey's of the world and all that is you're not going to be disciplined enough to do it, so you just can't touch it, right?
Yeah.
Well, just get yourself a card that has, like that Amex card, that has to be paid in full every month.
Right.
If you don't trust yourself to be able to do it, okay. But that Amex card is like no different than its own separate checking account. That's all it is. It's like you're going to think of it starting with $10,000 in there or whatever it is, and that's how much you have to spend. And whatever you spend on this date, it's got to be paid back. Well, it's like a checking account.
The argument about you can't handle a credit card, whatever the Ramsey argument is about having to use a debit card, I've always felt that is a lame ass argument because. I ask people, okay, you say you can't use a credit card responsibly, but do you own any knives that you have in your kitchen? Have you stabbed anybody with them? When you drive down the road, the only thing that separates you is a painted line on the road. How many times do you go across the line? So, a little bit of self-awareness and attention on if you are running up charges more on a credit card, is that a spending problem, or is that you've got no emergency fund and you're using the only thing that you can? And
if you have that kind of an issue, can't you just get in even bigger trouble with the debit card where you overspend and all of a sudden your rent's due?
Oh my God!
Overdrafts
are so much more expensive.
Yeah, at least if you screw up with a credit card, you've got a month to figure it out and fix it. You screw up with a debit card and bill's due tomorrow, bro. Oops.
Well, you screw up with a credit card and then, someone can go to you, Damon Day, DAMONDAY.com, and figure out a solution for it, which might include any number of financial options, including settling the card.
Yeah. Or maybe going bankrupt if things go back, south or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't, overspend on your debit card and be like, oh, okay, I got to go bankrupt.
That's right. Damon, how many debit cards have you settled?
0.
That's right.
And I have clients that come to me and go, oh, I've got this negative $2,000 balance in my checking account from overdraft or whatever, and I can't afford to pay it back. It's like, we can't touch that. We can't mess around with that, because if you don't pay that overdraft back at some point, there's this secret list out there. And you could get blackballed from the banking industry. I've had this happen to people before that I've heard about, and where you would not be able to, or it'd be extremely difficult for you to get a checking account again for years.
Right.
Right. So you do not, you got too much money on too much debt on a credit card, and we got to go bankrupt on that or settle it or negotiate the interest rate down or whatever. No big deal. Dings on your credit. You go overdraft on your checking account and you stiff them for that couple $1,000 and you don't pay them. You may never have a checking account for the next 5 or 10 years because no bank will approve you. Not a good thing.
You are correct. Let's loop back around to Zelle.
As I often am.
Yes, always. Let's loop back around to Zelle, because Zelle and these other payment platforms really took off during the whole COVID pandemic when people were stuck at home and transferring payments and stuff. And the banks unloaded this thing on early warning services around that time as well. So
that's a funny name for this too.
Early warning services?
Yeah, it's just like, what?
So, I mean, the way it works, in case nobody's used these things, is you as the user enter the recipient's email address or phone number in the app to send money. And I think what's really funny about, I don't know if Zelle does this, but with Venmo, you have two choices of transferring it, like private or public, right? Why the hell would I want to transfer it publicly? And
I know. And then people, you see this, and I see it in my feed, and people are like, $300 for this thing or whatever. And I'm
yeah,
like, I don't want people knowing my business of who I'm
right.
paying what money for, or how much I'm paying for, hitting lessons for my kid or whatever it is. Like, mine's always like locked down, dude. I don't need everybody knowing what
Yeah,
I'm buying.
right.
But yeah, you got this whole feed of seeing what all your friends and family
Are
pay
spending
for.
money on. Right.
Yeah.
You know
I
that
don't get
somebody
that.
somewhere has screwed up and like transferred money to a hooker.
Yeah, or they're like, dating a girl they shouldn't be dating because they have a girlfriend or whatever, or a wife or whatever.
Right.
And it was like, $50 for drinks with, Chelsea or whatever.
Right.
And then the wife's like, who's Chelsea? Oh, shoot.
Yeah. When it comes to scams with Zelle, this report that came out, this wonderful 62-page report, had found that 90% of consumers who reported scams were never reimbursed. Again, this is primarily talking about Zelle, and I think we could extrapolate that many of these issues also are faced by people who use the Square Cash App peer-to-peer, because they're the two similar ones. But if you have a 1 in 10 chance of having been scammed, of getting your money back, why would you use this financial instrument?
Yeah. Well, I had a client, this was about 2 years ago. He was an elderly gentleman, really, really nice guy. And he got scammed out of about 40 grand.
Yeah.
And it was on I'm not going to say the name of the bank, but it was on a major bank credit card,
Yeah.
where he had essentially, it wasn't the bank's fault. He had, on some of it, he had actually pulled the money out and just given it to the scam. It was an online business they were supposed to set up for him.
About. Yeah.
Right. And then some of it were actual straight up transactions that he did, but most of it, he had pulled the money out of the card and paid. I don't know however he did it, but he was out about $40,000, and he was disputing it with his credit card, and they investigated it. But at the end of the day, they kept coming back and saying, no, we're not going to reimburse this. But mainly they did that because they were like, we don't know what happened to the money. You took it out.
Yeah. Cash advanced the money, right?
Yeah. Once he took it out, now, had he charged all of that, the bank probably would have stepped in for him, but he had taken it out of the card and given essentially cash. Right. It wasn't like cold hard cash, but some kind of transaction. But anyway, the bottom line was so he was out 40 grand. I was able to negotiate and settle that credit card for him. So he didn't have to pay back the 40 grand. He had to pay back a portion of it, but it was a much smaller amount. And at least that saved him probably at least 30 grand. I can't remember what the actual deal was, but it was significantly less than he owed. But again, that's because it was on a credit card. If he had just taken the money out of his bank account,
right,
$40,000 out of his bank, and done the same thing, just pulled cash out of his bank account and given it to the scammers, he would be out the entire $40,000, nothing we can do. So even though the credit card wouldn't give him the money back, because he took it out of a credit card, I was at least able to help minimize that damage for him. Again, another reason why best to use a credit card.
Well, I mean, we could both be total hard asses and say, hey, if you initiated the transaction, too bad, so sad, man, you're out, whatever. However, and somebody could make that argument. That's great. However,
well, he was in retirement too. I mean, he was fixed income retirement. He could not pay that money back.
No, I'm talking about these peer-to-peer platforms. You initiated transaction, you're out. However, when you have other platforms that have much better protections, like PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, why would you use these others that give you less protection?
Well, one reason would be your son's hitting coach says, I only use Zelle. And I go, crap. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the Zelle payment. That could be a reason.
Well, I mean, the hitting coach payment is not your mortgage payment. So, you could
That's
be
true.
out and you have a history, but if you are offering this up as a payment mechanism, as your favorite payment one, you might want to think about it. And this is why it's important really for people facing any sort of financial pressure, is because individuals already struggling financially who lose money through a scam and can't get it back. This could be the tipping point. And lower income individuals are typically under more financial stress and are more likely to use peer-to-peer payment platforms because they don't have access to a credit card or don't use a debit card for whatever. So
Yeah.
there are some real consequences.
And one point I'll make too, because we do use Venmo, not a lot, but when we need to do peer to peer. But when we pay with Venmo, the Venmo is actually linked to that American Express Gold Card that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And with Zelle, and again, I could be wrong, but I think with Zelle it has to come out of a checking account directly. But with Venmo,
it does.
It normally comes out of a checking account, but they give you the option to link it to a credit card.
Yeah.
So so Venmo pulls from our American Express card. So I've never had to dispute anything, or anything like that. So I don't know how it would play out, but I think there would be a separate level of protection for me if I did have something go wrong with Venmo, where I might get American Express to be able to step in, even though they may say, well, that just went to Venmo and then we don't know where it went from there.
Well, but that's why when I use Venmo, just like you, I have a prompt that pops up, the PayPal prompt, and it says, do you want to use your credit card as the primary payment vehicle? Absolutely. I want to have my credit card. I want to have PayPal in there. I want to have everybody I can. So in case this thing goes to crap, I got some protection. Now, I've never made a giant unknown payment. Like, for example, the story I'm going to tell you is I had to make a $4,000 payment to a vendor I'd never used before. And I used PayPal. I said, no, I am not transferring you the money. I will pay through PayPal. And we did, and thank God, because the whole thing went south. If I had used one of these cash apps like Zelle, I doubt I would have ever gotten the money back. But PayPal, it took about 30 days, but I got every dollar back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. PayPal has been around longer. One thing in this article that you sent me over the summary on this Zelle thing. Here's something that's interesting, where it says younger users, particularly those under 35, are less likely to be reimbursed for fraud compared to older consumers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. Why do you think that? So this is, if somebody claims fraud and contacts Zelle and it asks for a refund, older users are much more likely. What were the percentages? 35% of users under 18 were reimbursed versus 68% for those over 65.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? That's clearly not a anomaly there.
No, I think it's just based on the type. Again, I'm doing air quotes. The type of entity or person that they're paying. I wouldn't transfer money to somebody I met at a party for running and getting me some tacos. But I don't see a 70-year-old doing that. Yeah, no.
You're probably right on that.
Well, hey, I got 5 years left, so don't put me in that category. But, I would pay a contractor that I know. I'd be more likely to do that. So I think it has to do with who the type of people that they're paying.
That could be true.
That some people have used Zelle to pay for their Coke or their weed or some other
Pepsi. Coke or Pepsi, is that what you're trying to say?
No, sir.
Well, the other thing I was thinking too, it could be that it's a generational thing where people over 65 are a hell of a lot more persistent on stuff that they especially if they deemed they were wrong, versus somebody under 35 might be more likely to just chalk it up to a mistake. Darn it. Okay, whatever. I don't know. Somebody takes $15 from you and you're 70 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, they might go to the ends of the earth to right that wrong.
Well, the other thing too is I think it has to do with experience. That, when I was younger, if somebody said, okay, well, you need to pay me this, I probably would have said, okay. But now, like, I just had somebody who gave me an estimate to do some work, and I was like, No.
Now you're like, wait just a cotton picking minute here.
Right. No way, Junior. We're not doing that.
Hold on. Get off my lawn.
Well, it was some landscaping work. And,
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. And the guy goes, $8,000. No, it's not. No. He goes, $7,000. No.
Last chance, 65.
Yeah. Thank you, but please leave now.
Are you sure? 6,000 today and today only.
Yeah,
only for 6,000 for you. Special price, Steve.
I got it done.
Price.
I got it done for 700.
What?
Yeah. The other guy was just making up numbers.
He was so busy he didn't care and was like, make me move price, basically.
Right. Yeah.
8,000.
No.
What was it, like a weekly mowing? 8,000?
No. It was some big heavy drainage ditch stuff.
Yeah. As I say, you got some crazy trees around your place and stuff.
Yeah.
So it could a lot of work. A bridge to nowhere, that kind of stuff.
Well, to summarize this whole Zelle thing, there are peer-to-peer networks that you can use. There are safer ones like PayPal, Google Pay, Apple Pay that give you more protection. If you had a choice and somebody said, can you pay me using Zelle or the Square Cash App? My advice would be, except for Damon's batting coach, no.
The biggest takeaway is be very careful if you're going to use it to pay somebody that you don't know, don't have a history with, because these things were designed to give your friend money for pizza.
Right.
That's kind of how they started. Like, kick your Jimmy down $5 for buying you a slice or whatever it was.
Right.
That's what was supposed to be for is just being able to exchange money without having cash amongst your peers, right? Amongst your friends. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of expanded. So like Steve gave the example with his $4,000, like, I don't know. So if you don't know that person very well, and it's an amount of money that you would not be okay with losing, don't use Cash App and Zelle and things like that. At minimum, use PayPal. But ideally, use a credit card, especially if it's a business.
Yes.
And they're saying, no, we don't take a credit card. To me, that's a red flag. I do when I do these penny stupid projects and I drive, people around. I used to drive for Lyft Black and Uber and all that. Now, sometimes I'll do private rides because I've kind of built a little bit of a clientele where I'll do, private rides to the airport and stuff like that. And I take Zelle, I take, PayPal, I take Square, I take credit cards.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll do an ACH transaction or a debit card if somebody really wants to.
You'd probably even take a paper check.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but it's a private client. Yeah, I'll take from the clients I'm driving around. Right. Sure, I'll take a check.
Yeah.
But my point is, if it's a legitimate business and it's not going to take a credit card, I don't want to pay the 3% fee. No, you're going to lose a lot more business not taking a credit card than you will paying the 3% fee. So if they're not willing to do a credit card and it's an actual business, it might not be an actual business and you might not want to send them any Zelle.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because there was a vendor recently when I said, I'm not paying you by wire transfer. I will pay you by credit card or PayPal. And they said, well, we'll do PayPal, but we're going to have to charge you 3% extra. And I was like, fine.
Yeah.
I'd much rather pay the 3% extra than have to, what am I going to do with a wire payment that those funds are instantly cleared? I'm out. I don't know you.
Yeah, exactly. So the takeaway is use Zelle for your friends. That's it. Or businesses that you really trust.
Yeah, and nothing more than a taco.
And don't type the wrong email address in.
That's right. And when you're on Venmo, be sure to cruise all the things that your friends are paying for and ask yourself, why the hell are they doing this?
Yeah.
All right, David.
Steve.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was actually a very enlightening conversation.
I know. And I'm going to have to bow out on the next podcast we were going to do because I have a client call in 2 minutes.
All right.
We talked too long on this one.
All right, man. See ya.
Peace.